Let me say.
That's okay. Richard.
Hey, Scott. I'm Dr. Richard Hooker. Just returned from being overseas and working with military adolescents and families for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
Where we implemented the client-directed outcome-informed approach.
Pretty much all over Western Europe, isn't that right?
Yes. And then currently I've taken a position as an associate professor of addictions counseling at a university in the Midwest.
Great.
My experience has been that we piloted this project about 6 years ago, and then we implemented it into all of the military installations worldwide.
And what was you think, in the beginning, the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge was to get buy-in from staff to show them the usefulness of the instruments. They all understood that we needed some additional outcome measures, but as they began to work with it and began to see its value and how it could improve practice, and they got that buy-in, then I think we were on a roll.
And Richard, one challenge in your particular setting that I know about, because I work pretty closely with you and the counselors over a long period of time, is that you're not all in a single office. You're spread all over the world, and in some cases there would be one clinician literally on a base in some, dare I say, far-flung area of the world. So the treatment isn't working. What's that clinician supposed to do?
Yeah, that's really true. We're very spread out. Some of my counselors were 450 miles even away, and maybe, as you say, the only counselor on that installation. And what we instituted was a way of them to call in for consultation. And we set up, through the training of working with you and others, flags, to look at. We could also see their trajectories, and so it'd be very common that they would call and say, hey, I'm at the third session, I've got a flat trajectory, here's what's going on. Let's brainstorm about what to do, and then we'd make changes and look and see if those changes had any effect.
So now wait a second. You actually, even though these folks are 450 miles away, you, the supervisor, you're also watching, looking at the trajectories.
Yes. I call it outcome-informed supervision.
Okay.
Because what you could do, whether you were looking through the actual medical records or the files, or you were looking on the electronic database, you could go through and look at the trajectories. And so maybe a counselor had 30 cases. Some they might be spaced out to once a month or once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe there's 4 or 5 out of those that you look at and say, wow, these would be interesting to talk about because something's going on here.
Yeah.
And so then you could call them and say, hey, what about this person? And you could initiate that call, and therefore you're directing your energy and your focus on those cases where change might be most indicated and the intervention might be the most meaningful.
Yeah. And now, how did you keep your clinicians, or how did you invite or create that culture of feedback? Sometimes I hear that in agencies, wow, my supervisor's spying on me. This isn't. How did it happen in your setting that it was a culture in which the feedback was not only, it was actually, they called you sometimes for this. How did that happen?
Yeah, I would get called all the time throughout the week on one case or a couple cases. And I think as supervisors, we use the same tools that we use as clinicians, and that is we create a culture of feedback.
Yeah.
That we make it non-threatening, that we brainstorm with our clinicians, that when they find it useful, I'm providing them a service.
Okay, all right.
And when they find that service useful, then they'll use it.
Okay, so this wasn't some punitive thing. Hey, you're not following agency guidelines. This was more about you helping them help the people that they wanted to help.
Yeah, how can I be helpful?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the conversation, I would always invite feedback as well, even though it wasn't a formal SRS or anything. But what about our conversation today about this case or these cases? Did you find it helpful? Was there something I could have done that was different, where I might have been more helpful?
Yeah. And now, Richard, truly, at this year's Training of Trainers event, you're one of the more experienced folks here using the measures, etc. Is there a takeaway from this experience over these 5 days, given your very broad and deep and long experience with CDOI?
Yeah, I think it's like how do you switch gears, change hats, change roles from being in a place where you're doing it, you're seeing clients, you're doing clinical supervision, to moving into that different role of how would I articulate this, what other tools would I use as a trainer as opposed to a clinical supervisor or a clinician. So I think that's the takeaway, is what new skills can I get that will work better in the training environment as opposed to the other environments I mentioned.
It's been such a pleasure having you here, Richard. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks.